Hey Raiders fans, how's everyone feeling today? Let's dive into some important news, but before that, I've got a quick question for you. Can you guess the Raider I'm thinking of right now? He's young, talented, and has been a starter for the last few seasons. Got it? All right, I'll tell you. It's Dylan Parham. Now, here's the tough part. There's a real chance that the Raiders might be moving on from Parham this offseason. Yeah, you heard that right. After starting for 3 straight years, his future with the team is suddenly uncertain. But hold up. Before we go deeper into the latest update, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and don't forget to press the bell icon so you never miss the latest Raiders news. All right, now let's get back into it. So, what's going on with Dylan Parham? Well, according to a recent report, Alex Cappa is currently the early favorite to take over the starting spot at right guard. That's a big deal because Parham started at right guard last season for the Raiders, and in the 2 years before that, he mostly played left guard. The man has been versatile, no doubt. But here's the thing. Parham is now heading into the final year of his contract. This season could decide a lot about his future in the league. If he's not starting, his chances of landing a big contract, either with the Raiders or in free agency, could take a hit. And let's be real. If you're Dylan Parham and you've started 3 seasons in the NFL, it's got to sting to be told you might not start under a new coaching regime. It's not personal, it's business. But if that's the case, there's a possibility the Raiders might look to trade him instead of keeping him as a backup. He's simply too talented to sit on the bench. In the next part, I'll break down why this situation is even more complicated than it looks, and what it means for the Raiders moving forward. If I were a part of Dylan Parham's camp right now, I'd honestly be pushing for a fresh start somewhere else. Why? Because sitting on the bench in the final year of your rookie contract isn't the best way to prove your worth, or secure a big payday in 2026. Let's talk about why a trade could actually make sense for Parham, and for the Raiders. First off, Parham has been through a lot since entering the league. Drafted in the 4th round out of Memphis, he was brought in under the old regime, Josh McDaniels and Dave Ziegler. And to be fair, when he first arrived, there was real excitement about his potential. I mean, he had the tools to be either a solid guard or even a center of the future. But the NFL doesn't wait for anyone. Since joining the Raiders, Parham has already dealt with 3 different head coaches, starting with McDaniels, then Antonio Pierce, and now Pete Carroll stepping in. And it doesn't stop there. He's also worked under 4 different offensive line coaches, from James Craig to Carmen Bracillo, then Brennan Carroll, and even Joe Philbin stepping in at one point last season after Craig was let go. That kind of constant change makes it tough for any player to build rhythm or trust in a system. Every new coach brings a different style, a new vision, and often their own preferred players. Now, here's where things get even more interesting. The Raiders just signed Alex Cappa. You can argue all day about who's the better player, Parham or Cappa, but in the end, it's not about public opinion. What really matters is what Pete Carroll and GM John Spytek think. And here's the kicker. Cappa already has history with people in this organization. He knows the system, he knows the coaches, and that gives him a clear edge. That's why, even though Parham might be the better lineman on paper, Cappa is being labeled the early favorite to start at right guard. On top of that, the Raiders brought him in on a short-term deal worth $5 million, a clear sign they want to see him prove himself fast. It's not a long-term commitment, but it's enough to shake up the depth chart. For Parham, it's yet another challenge in an already rocky journey with the Raiders. In the next section, we'll dive deeper into how these decisions affect the team's chemistry and what could happen next for Parham and the offensive line as a whole. Now, let's turn the spotlight on you, Raiders Nation. Do you think Dylan Parham will be a starter this season? It's a tough call, right? I mean, we're still early in the offseason. Things can shift quickly in May, June, and even July. But let's forget about all that for a second and focus on right now. If you had to decide today, is Parham starting or is he heading to the bench? As for my take, I'd say he has a real shot to start, but it's honestly a 50-50 situation at this point. A lot depends on how things shake out over the summer and whether other teams show interest in bringing him on board. That interest could be a major factor in what happens next. Now, here's something to think about. Parham's chances of starting might be stronger at left guard than at right guard. Why? Because with Cappa likely locking down the right side, Parham's path would be clearer if he competes for that left guard spot. His main competition there would likely be Jordan Meredith and possibly Caleb Rogers, but even then, nothing is guaranteed. If Parham ends up not winning a starting job, the Raiders would be smart to explore trading him. Why let someone with starting experience just sit on the bench, especially when other teams could use a player like him? He's played in a lot of games and has the kind of versatility that coaches love. He can play multiple spots on the line, which makes him valuable around the league. Another factor that could lead to a possible move? The Raiders added serious depth through the draft. One of the big names they brought in was Ashton Jeanty, and while he's not an offensive lineman, many of the offseason moves, including draft picks, seem designed to support his success. Also, let's not forget that the Raiders selected Caleb Rogers and Charles Grant, both offensive linemen, in the third round. That's a clear signal. This team is building depth, and they're looking for competition across the line. Drafting two linemen that early, when other areas also needed attention, shows just how much they want to shake things up in the trenches. Up next, we'll dig into how Parham's trade value stacks up across the league and what kind of return the Raiders might expect if they decide to make that move. The Raiders had plenty of options in the draft. They could have gone after a free safety. They could have added another linebacker. But instead, they doubled down on building up the offensive line. That decision speaks volumes. It shows how seriously this team values the trenches, the heart of any successful football squad. And when you look at the players they brought in, it's clear there's a plan forming, one that might not include Dylan Parham in the long term. Let's talk about Caleb Rogers. This guy played all over the line in college: left tackle, left guard, even right tackle. That kind of flexibility makes him a natural fit for a coaching staff that wants depth and adaptability. And here's the twist. Parham's biggest strength is also his versatility. But now, someone younger and cheaper has entered the picture with that same skill set. So, if you're trying to figure out how to move on from Parham without needing a big free agent like Cappa, well, this draft made that path very clear. The Raiders selected two linemen who could eventually take over. Rogers brings flexibility. Charles Grant, another mid-round pick, looks like a long-term project with serious upside. When you take a step back, it starts to feel like the Raiders are preparing for a future without Parham. They've covered their bases. Cappa for now, rookies for later. They didn't just throw bodies onto the depth chart. They made deliberate moves with an eye on development and competition. Dylan Parham has started for the last 3 seasons. He's proven he can hold his own. But in the NFL, teams are always looking to upgrade and evolve. If younger players step up during training camp or preseason, the team might decide it's time to move forward with new talent. And honestly, that's just how it works in this league. When a team starts investing draft picks into your position, it's a signal. Whether Parham stays or goes might depend on how quickly these rookies adjust and whether he can outplay them. Coming up next, we'll explore what kind of return the Raiders could get if they decide to put Parham on the trade block, and which teams might come calling. Let's get back to Dylan Parham, and why a trade could actually make a lot of sense right now. Here's one of the biggest factors: his contract. Parham is entering the final year of his rookie deal. That alone puts him in a tricky spot. Players in that position want to prove their value, because this is the year that could decide their future. If he has a strong season, he might cash in with a big contract. But if he's sitting on the bench, that opportunity fades fast. Now, let's look at this from the Raiders' point of view. If they decide to move on from Parham, they can save $3.7 million in cap space. The cost of letting him go? Just a small dead cap hit, around $228,000. That's a very manageable number for a team trying to stay flexible with its budget. And for any team that trades for him, it's a low-risk move. they'd get a proven offensive lineman on a cheap, one-year prove-it deal. That's attractive, especially for teams dealing with injuries or depth concerns on their line. These kinds of trades don't always happen early, but keep your eyes on June and July. That's when front offices start reviewing their rosters more closely. It's also when we see more action. Teams cutting players, making late additions, and getting ready for training camp. If Parham isn't clearly in the mix as a starter by that time, don't be surprised if the Raiders quietly start taking calls. Because here's the reality. Versatile linemen are valuable, and Parham has already shown he can play multiple positions. If there's even a slight doubt about his future role with this new coaching staff, the Raiders might prefer to get value for him now rather than lose him for nothing later. And hey, for Parham, a fresh start somewhere else, where he can step in and start right away, might be exactly what he needs to set up a big payday in 2026. Next up, we'll take a look at which teams could be realistic trade partners if the Raiders decide to pull the trigger. Let's be honest, holding on to Dylan Parham might actually be the smartest move the Raiders can make right now. Even if he's not penciled in as a starter today, he could still be one of the most valuable pieces on the depth chart. Why? Because the NFL season is unpredictable. Injuries happen, players get shuffled around, and sometimes the most crucial contributor isn't the starter. It's the next man up. Parham's been through it all. He's adapted to 2 head coaches, multiple offensive line coaches, and a rotating cast of quarterbacks. Despite that, he's consistently lined up and played hard. Nearly 3,000 snaps over the past 3 seasons. That's not just experience, that's battle-tested experience. And he's not just a one-position guy. Parham has played left guard, right guard, and even center. That kind of versatility is rare, especially for someone who's still young and hungry. He may not be a superstar name on the national radar, but within football circles, that flexibility and durability matter a lot. Let's look at the numbers. Last season, Parham posted a solid PFF grade of 74.5 across 882 snaps. Sure, he allowed 36 pressures, which was on the high side, but look at the context. The Raiders were dealing with chaotic quarterback situations, inconsistent offensive coordination, and constant changes along the line. Under those conditions, it's hard for anyone to shine. Still, he only gave up 5 sacks and 3 penalties. Not perfect, but certainly respectable given the circumstances. And he did it while remaining healthy, available, and ready to go week after week. If there's one knock on him, it's this: he needs more strength. Adding some bulk this offseason could make a massive difference. If Parham can come into camp 10 to 15 pounds stronger, his chances of winning a starting role go way up. But let's say the Raiders stick with the new additions. Let's say Cappa, Caleb Rogers, and Charles Grant really step up. What happens then? The trade deadline becomes key. If Parham isn't starting by mid-season, that's when his name will heat up in trade talks. Teams are always looking for interior line help as injuries pile up, and Parham's experience, health, and flexibility will catch attention. Whether it's right before training camp or closer to the deadline, that's when front offices get aggressive. And if you're the Raiders, that's when you can maximize value, not by cutting him, but by flipping him at just the right time. Coming up next, let's explore the most likely trade partners and exactly what kind of return Las Vegas could get if they decide to move Parham this offseason. Let's talk about something that could quietly reshape the Raiders' offensive line strategy: Dylan Parham's trade value and where he could realistically land if the team decides to move on. At this point in the offseason, every front office across the league is scanning rosters, watching OTAs, and preparing for training camp. That means opportunities are forming, and teams with shaky offensive lines are paying attention to players like Parham. He's the kind of guy who may not headline a trade ticker, but he's absolutely the kind of piece that teams covet behind the scenes, especially those looking to stabilize the interior line. Now, let's zero in on a few teams that make the most sense if the Raiders were to deal Parham. There are 2 obvious candidates with familiar ties to Las Vegas: the Patriots and the Titans. Both teams have connections to former Raiders decision-makers like Dave Ziegler and Josh McDaniels, guys who know Parham's game and what he brings to the locker room. But they're not the only ones. The Ravens, Texans, Colts, and Seahawks stand out as logical landing spots. Why? They've all got interior line concerns or depth questions at guard and center. For a player like Parham, who can start if needed but also step in as a reliable backup, it's a perfect match. So what would a trade look like? If the Raiders decide to make a move, the realistic return would probably be something like a 2026 fifth-round pick, maybe with a swap of late-round picks, such as a seventh-rounder. It's not flashy, but it's the kind of deal that helps build long-term roster depth. Now, would that be a good trade? That depends entirely on how confident the Raiders are in their new additions. If Caleb Rogers, Charles Grant, Jordan Meredith, and Alex Cappa look solid heading into camp, then yes, it makes sense. You get value for a player who might not start and avoid losing him for nothing in free agency. But if there's even the slightest doubt that Parham could still win a starting job or be needed as injury insurance, then you hold on to him. You don't trade away durable, flexible linemen unless you're absolutely sure the next group is ready to roll. Up next, we'll dive into how this move, or lack thereof, could affect the Raiders' overall offensive strategy heading into the season.